The Vatican's hidden vampire secrets. Chapter 1. The catacombs beneath the Holy See. Beneath the radiant halls of St. Peter's Basilica, where pilgrims kneel in prayer, lies a darkness untouched by sunlight for nearly 2 millennia. The Vatican catacombs, silent, endless corridors of bone and stone, were never meant for the living to see. They stretch like veins beneath the heart of Christendom, carrying whispers of things that the Church has long buried, both in earth and in memory. Ancient records, preserved only in fragments, tell us these tunnels were more than resting places for martyrs. They were battlefields. Priests once ventured below with crucifixes and fire, returning with blood upon their vestments and terror etched into their eyes. They wrote of pale figures crouched among the tombs, gnawing on corpses, drinking marrow and blood as though the graves themselves had fed them. These creatures, they claimed, did not fear God's house. They dwelt beneath it. But not all who entered those corridors returned. And those who did sometimes came back changed. Accounts hidden within the Vatican archives speak of men who staggered into the light days later, their eyes blackened, their veins dark with rot. They spoke no prayers, only hissed of hunger. For centuries, the Vatican sealed these passages. Doors bricked shut, corridors collapsed. The faithful were told these were measures against grave robbers or plague. But in truth, the Church was walling away something older, hungrier, and immune to confession. What else do those corridors conceal? Some claim entire chambers, frescoes painted not of saints, but of winged predators drinking from human throats. Others whisper of reliquaries not holding holy bones, but teeth sharpened, monstrous, preserved as trophies from a war the Church dares not admit it fought. The Vatican catacombs are more than tombs. They are scars. And scars always tell the story of the wound that left them. Chapter 2. The Forbidden Manuscripts. Deep within the Vatican archives, a labyrinth of shelves, stretching over 80 kilometers, lies a section no pilgrim will ever see. This is the restricted vault, guarded not by locks alone, but by oaths, secrecy, and the silence of centuries. Tout ce public disaient hypocrites, royal correspondenciology. But among these papers are pages that tell a story far stranger, and far more terrifying. Scholars who once brushed against these texts whispered of parchments written in iron ink, bound not in leather, but in skin. In them, bishops described encounters with beings who fed not on bread, but blood. They wrote of villages in Eastern Europe where entire congregations vanished overnight, pews still warm with bodies, but drained, lifeless, throats torn like parchment ripped from its binding. One manuscript, dated to the 15th century, tells of a visitatio tenebris, a visitation of darkness. A priest from Wallachia, terrified and trembling, recorded in his diary that he had confessed a nobleman whose sins were beyond mortal comprehension. The noble spoke calmly of centuries, of feeding on his serfs as one sips from a chalice, and of a hunger no absolution could cleanse. The priest wrote his eyes were black as midnight, and yet he laughed as I read him scripture, as though the word itself bent around him like wind against stone. But these manuscripts go further. They speak of the Vatican's own experiments, priests attempting to understand, even harness, the blood of such beings. It is said that, in secret chambers, guarded by Swiss halberds, flasks of blackened ichor remain sealed to this day, labelled only with numbers and warnings. The ink stains of those who handled it remain on the pages, smeared as if written in haste or in terror. Why were these texts hidden? Officially, to preserve purity of faith. But truth whispers another answer, because knowledge is dangerous. Because if mankind knew the church had faced such predators, and perhaps failed to destroy them, then faith itself might shatter. And yet, the most chilling passages are those which describe not the monsters, but the church's silence. Entire centuries erased from public chronicles. Whole towns struck from maps, the dead uncounted. Their stories interred not in graves, but in archives beneath Rome. The Vatican knows. The pages confess it. And every page locked away is a wound upon history. A wound that still bleeds. Chapter 3. The relics and the blood of the damned. Among the Vatican's most sacred halls, reliquaries shine with gold and crystal, bones of saints, fragments of the true cross, vials of oil said to never decay. Pilgrims see these and believe. Yet beneath these displays, hidden from the eyes of the faithful, lie relics no pope dares to bless. These are the relics of the damned. The first mention comes from a 12th century inventory list, where among chalices and holy vestments appears a strange note, Fio av sangs obscurus blood darkness. It is said to be sealed in glass so black it drinks the light, and those who carried it wrote that the liquid inside moved of its own will, like a living shadow. The label bore no saint's name, only a warning in Latin, ni tongito, do not touch. But the relics are not only blood. In one locked chamber lies what archivists once called the nail of Nocturne. According to the writings of an exiled monk, this jagged iron spike was driven not into Christ, but into a creature believed to have stalked Jerusalem during the early days of the church. The monk wrote that its shrieks were heard for 7 days after crucifixion, though its body rotted not. The nail, pulled 3 centuries later, was kept not for veneration, but for fear, for when uncovered, animals grew restless, shadows deepened, and the air grew heavy with the stench of iron and rot. Other relics are more grotesque still. A chalice, once thought to be a vessel for mass, revealed itself to be lined not with gold, but with enamel made from ground bone. The rim, they say, bears bite marks as if it were used not for wine, but for feeding. Some priests whispered that this chalice belonged to a cardinal who succumbed to temptation, feasting in secret on his own flock before being burned in silence. The Vatican hides these things because they are evidence that the line between the sacred and the profane is thin, perhaps thinner than we wish to believe. For if the blood of saints heals, could not the blood of monsters corrupt? If relics channel divine power, might not other relics bind unholy strength? Imagine walking through the Vatican's endless halls, knowing that somewhere behind the locked steel doors lies a vial of blackened ichor, or cursed nail, or a chalice stained with human screams. Pilgrims kneel in awe before gilded shrines, never suspecting that a few floors below, the same church hides proof of its eternal war with predators who cannot die. And perhaps the most haunting question of all, why keep them? Why not destroy these relics outright? The answer, though never written, whispers through centuries, because to destroy such things, one must wield them. And to wield them is to risk becoming what the church fears most. Chapter 4. The silenced histories. History is rarely the truth itself. It is what the powerful allow to remain. Nowhere is this clearer than in the Vatican's dealings with the vampire. Take the Chronicles of Basel. Written in 1477, they once described not plague but villagers drained of blood, corpses rising from their graves. Today, when scholars open those pages, the passages are smeared in black ink. Only remain na margem decretum silentium, the decree of silence. The church feared not only monsters, but the panic their existence would spark. Better to erase the memory than let whispers spread. Priests who investigated cursed. Villagers often returned with nothing to report. Not because nothing was found, but because their discoveries could not be spoken. In 1732, a Jesuit envoy described a noble house in Transylvania, accused of harbouring a hunger wrapped in flesh. Soldiers burned the estate. In the Vatican's records, this became only house condemned for heresy. No mention of blood, no mention of screams. Witnesses were erased with equal precision. Monks who kept journals of visitations had their writings seized. Some vanished entirely. Manuals of the Inquisition once contained entire sections on the unhallowed ones, but later editions quietly removed them. Yet traces survived. Smuggled letters told of a hidden chamber beneath St. Peter's, a vault of forbidden texts. Another spoke of the Red Codex, a book bound in human skin, chronicling every encounter between Rome and the children of the night. The Vatican denies such a thing exists, but denial itself is a confession. Why silence so many voices? Because admitting these creatures walked among us would fracture the illusion of divine order. The faithful must believe the Church commands the night. They must never know the shadows sometimes won. And so, history was rewritten. Estates reduced to heresy. Exorcisms called illness. Plague called fever. The world was told to pray while the truth was locked, away in chambers no common eyes will ever see. Yet silence is never eternal. The voice is inked over, the stories buried, the witnesses erased, still they wait. In those forbidden vaults beneath Rome, truth lingers, and one day it may bleed back into the light. Chapter 5. The Forbidden Vaults. Beneath the polished marble of St. Peter's Basilica lies a silence no hymn can sanctify. Few speak of it, fewer still have seen it. Yet its presence lingers like a shadow on holy stone. The Vatican vaults. To the public, they are archived scrolls, relics, papal decrees. But whispers say there is another level, one deeper, colder, locked by keys that bear no earthly symbols. Here lie the relics the Church cannot parade. Here lie the testimonies of creatures who defy salvation. A 16th century ledger describes a procession of wagons arriving under moonlight, guarded by soldiers sworn to silence. Within them, coffins, not for the dead, but for the restless. Some were said to be chained, their lids sealed with wax and scripture. The coffins never left. In another sealed record from 1816, a monk described a chamber where no candle could burn, where claws had scratched stone. He was silenced the following year. His notes, however, remain stained with a rust the archivists refused to test. Even the relics betray secrets. A chalice etched with teeth marks, said to have been used in rites to test whether blood could be sanctified. Fragments of bone that heal faster than they decay. A mask of iron fitted with spikes on the inside, designed not to punish the faithful but to prevent something from biting through. And then there is the most dangerous rumour of all, the Codex Sanguinis, a tome bound in pale human flesh, written in inks that never fade. Within its pages, according to the scattered whispers of archivists, lies the unbroken lineage of vampiric bloodlines from Cain's cursed son, through medieval lords to those said to walk among us still. Some claim the Codex names names. Others believe it records the very prayers meant to bind their hunger. The Vatican denies it, but every denial feels rehearsed. Why keep such horrors instead of destroying them? Because to destroy is to forget, and forgetting invites repetition. The Church has always known. One cannot conquer the night if one blinds oneself to its shape. So the vaults remain, sealed beneath Rome, guarded not by priests but by silence itself. And if you listen closely on certain nights, when the Basilica is empty and the city sleeps, some claim you can hear the faintest sound rising from beneath the stone, scratching, waiting. The question remains, are these secrets safeguarded for humanity, or hidden to preserve the illusion of control? Perhaps both. But one truth is certain: the Vatican has not vanquished the vampire. It has merely caged its memory, and like all cages, it will not hold forever.